Britain once ruled the roads with its bold truck designs and spotless fleets. Drivers were heroes, and families kept a score of every shining rig they spotted on the motorway. But behind the glory came troubled debts, deals, and a fall no one saw coming. From small-town beginnings to corporate collapse, this is how Britain's lorry legacy rose, shined, and nearly disappeared. Eddie Stobart started in the 1960s with agricultural hauling around Cumbria. Eddie Stobart wasn't a mogul or billionaire. He was just a guy with a green truck and hunger to get things moving. His first rig hauled grain and fertilizer, small-time stuff. But what set him apart wasn't the load, it was the look. The truck was always spotless, the lettering was sharp, people noticed. That was the beginning of something no one saw coming. By the 1970s, Eddie's son Edward was running the show. Edward was obsessed with image, presentation, branding. Every Stobart lorry had to be clean, drivers wore uniforms, trucks had names. Actual names like Emma Jane or Angelica Jade. It was unheard of in the haulage game. While other firms were covered in grime and oil, Stobart rigs rolled up like showroom pieces. Kids started spotting them on the motorway. Families kept score. There's another one became a national game. Behind the scenes, the Stobarts were building a logistical machine. They picked routes that made sense. They hired drivers that took pride in the job. They built a reputation for reliability. In the UK haulage world, where breakdowns and late loads were the norm, that meant something. Clients trusted them. Supermarkets, suppliers, anyone who needed something delivered on time every time turned to Stobart. By the 1990s, Eddie Stobart trucks were everywhere. Super clean Scania and Volvo rigs with that iconic green, white and red colors dominated British roads. The public loved it. The company had its own fan club. People would send letters asking for photos. Some would visit the depots just to see the trucks get washed. It was the kind of brand loyalty usually only seen with football clubs, not haulage firms. Then came the merchandise. T-shirts, die-cast models, calendars flooded the market. The company leaned into it. They released VHS tapes showing behind the scenes at the depots. The drivers became minor celebrities. There was even a CB radio fan culture that treated Stobart rigs like royalty. They weren't just delivering goods anymore. They were delivering nostalgia, identity, a bit of British pride, one clean lorry at a time. But while the public saw the polish, the inside was shifting. In 2004, Edward Stobart sold the business. It was time. The brand was still powerful, but it had outgrown its family roots. A new ownership group took over, led by William Stobart and Andrew Tinkler. With it came the beginning of something bigger and riskier. The company started expanding into rail freight, warehousing, biomass. It became Eddie Stobart Logistics, a full-blown logistics empire. The trucks were still rolling, but now the money was in infrastructure, operations, big contracts. At first, it worked. The company was listed on the stock market. Investors came pouring in. Profits went up. But the soul slowly started peeling away. Trucks still had names. Drivers still wore the uniforms. But it was different. Less passion, more spreadsheets. The fans noticed. The drivers noticed. By the mid-2010 seconds, things started wobbling. The company was taking on more than it could handle. Too many sectors, too many shifts in leadership. The logistics arm was sold, restructured, bought back, spun off again. It was hard to keep track. Meanwhile, smaller haulage firms were catching up. Faster tech, lower overhead, newer rigs gained market share. Eddie Stobart's army of clean, uniformed drivers couldn't compete with leaner operations using advanced tracking and AI route mapping. Behind the curtain, the cracks deepened. Financial troubles surfaced. In 2019, the company's shares were suspended after a major accounting error. Then came the headlines: emergency bailouts, leadership shakeups, lawsuits followed. It was chaos. For a while, it looked like the whole empire might vanish. For people who grew up loving those trucks, it felt personal. It wasn't just another business stumbling. It was Eddie Stobart, the name on the side of the lorry you'd wave to as a kid, the brand you collected on model shelves, the company that somehow made trucking feel magical. The thing about legacy brands is they never really die. Even after Eddie Stobart Logistics hit the wall in 2019, the name still held power. People didn't stop spotting the trucks. The paint jobs still popped on the motorway. Despite the chaos behind closed doors, the name meant something to the public. That green and white lorry wasn't just a truck, it was Eddie Stobart, To a lot of folks, that meant trust. After the financial collapse and shareholder panic, the company was in freefall. Stock suspended, executives walked out, panic in the press. But just before things totally crumbled, a buyout deal landed. The business was rescued by private equity. Cash was injected, control was handed over to DBAY Advisors, a firm that basically came in with a fire extinguisher and a spreadsheet. Their goal was to strip it down, simplify, stabilize. The empire had gotten too big for its boots. Now it was time to get back to basics. But something had changed. The magic wasn't there anymore. The fan club was still active, but quieter. The drivers, many had left. The uniforms, not enforced like before. The trucks still had names. But the sparkle, the pride, it was fading. Because when a brand built on personality gets turned into just another logistics machine, people feel it. It's like turning your favorite pub into a Tesco Express. The bones are there, but the soul's gone. Even with the new ownership, recovery was slow. Eddie Stobart, the company, was technically alive, running trucks, managing warehouses, shipping goods. But Eddie Stobart, the idea, the national treasure, that was on life support. In the background, other haulers were growing fast. DPD, Hermes, Amazon's in-house fleet expanded rapidly. These operations weren't worried about paint jobs or catchy names. They were focused on raw efficiency, algorithm-driven routes, 24-hour operations. Driverless tech on the horizon dominated discussions. Meanwhile, Stobart was stuck between its legacy and the future. In 2021, the Eddie Stobart name was sold to the Cunay Group, a global logistics giant. They took over truck operations, keeping the fleet on the road, but under a new corporate umbrella. For the first time, the famous green and red lorries weren't owned by Eddie Stobart Logistics. The brand had become a licensed identity, more logo than legacy. That moment marked the end of an era. The family-run icon of spotless trucks and friendly waves had turned into a corporate asset numbers on a spreadsheet, stripped of its heart. Yet somehow, the magic never fully faded. Eddie Stobart wasn't just built on engines and freight, it was built on recognition. No one smiles at an XPO logistics truck, but a Stobart lorry still turns heads. Kids still wave, drivers still honk, and fans still trade stories online. The nostalgia runs deep. Model kits, merch, tribute videos, and vintage shows keep the name alive. Somewhere on a British lay-by, a driver still sips tea beside a gleaming Volvo FH16 named Grace Elizabeth. Eddie Stobart may no longer be the indie darling of British haulage, but its roots remain buried deep in motorway culture. The empire may have fallen, but the name still rolls proudly down the M6, a moving piece of history.